But life is so simple that she's had time for prayer, time for Bible study, time to focus on things that are really important in life, time for relationships. And if you're like me, you're living in a world that is like a squirrel cage of activity. You're just spinning and spinning and spinning, and it's like perpetual motion. What would it take to get us to start thinking of ways that we could slow that page down? That we could find time for the things that really matter in life. That we could discover how to really prioritize our lives in such a manner that God could speak to us the way He spoke to Samuel. Wouldn't that be something? But here we are, living a life that, for many of us, is very distracted. While we're not officially worshiping other gods today, made of wood or stone, I would submit to you that we need to do some personal self-evaluation. Never before in the history of the planet have we seen such a materialistic society as we have today. We are very distracted. Materialism is potentially going to destroy us unless we somehow learn how to say stop. Where are my priorities? Is it wrong to have things? No. What becomes the problem is when things have us. And I think for too many of us today, that's where we are. Our things own us. We don't own things. And we're controlled by lifestyles that we have, if we had sat back and evaluated how we would spend the day before we got into our current job, before we started doing what we currently do, before you got to where you are today, if you could sit back in the peace of a month off. The sabbatical I had last summer was fantastic. To be able to sit back and reflect and to evaluate what's really important in life, if you could just have some time to reprioritize your day the way it ought to be, what would it look like? Would it be different than what you're currently doing? Would things be different if you could establish an ideal pattern for your life, starting from the time you get up in the morning until the time you go to bed at night? Would things be different if you could chart an ideal day? I'm just curious, how many of you, if you could reprioritize your day the way you think it ought to really be, how many of you would make some changes? Let me see your hands. I would. I would make some changes. And I'm wondering how we can get to the point of establishing in our lives the way it ought to be. After all, if God convicts you that your life ought to be different than it is right now, do you suppose God would also give you the ability and the power to make the changes that you need to make? Let me see your hands if you think He would do that. I mean, He's already told us, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Right? He's already told us that He will be there for us. He said, consider the lilies of the field and how they grow. They don't worry about things. And we're worrying, aren't we? How am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? And our squirrel cage keeps spinning. I think we need to be challenged today by the life of Samuel. A simple life that simply said, God first. No distractions with other gods. We can learn from the life of Samuel. As I read Hebrews chapter 11, I see Samuel's name appear there, as with all of the other names in this honorable mention list. I was wondering, what fault could I find with Samuel? As far as his life goes, there is nothing that I could find in his life except exemplary behavior, except for one thing. Samuel made one very, very serious mistake. Had he not made this mistake, I believe his name would have been shining like some others that had a lengthier description in the book of Hebrews, chapter 11. As Samuel was getting older, remember he had an annual circuit judge work that he was doing. And as he was getting older, he made the decision to hand off the judging in Israel to his two sons. His two sons were not godly. His two sons were not giving right judgment. As a result of what his sons were doing, it was because of the discontent of Israel through the inappropriate judging of the sons of Samuel that Israel demanded, we want a king. We don't like what's going on now. This is not godly. Give us a king. Samuel was upset because the people wanted a king. God saw the circumstances they were dealing with, and even though kingship was not the ideal for God, God saw the situation they were facing, and he said, let them have what they're asking for. But if Samuel had not appointed ungodly judges in Israel, Israel would not have needed a king. To leave, those sitting near the Marathon gate suddenly heard the sound of sirens and police whistles. All eyes turned to the gate. A lone figure wearing the colors of Tanzania entered the stadium. His name was John Stephen Akwari. He was the last man to finish the marathon. His leg bloodied and bandaged, severely injured in a fall. He grimaced with each step. He hobbled around the 400-meter track. And the spectators rose and applauded him as if he were the winner. After crossing the finish line, Akwari slowly walked off the field without turning to the cheering crowd. In view of his injury and having no chance of winning a medal, someone asked him why he had not quit. He replied, my country did not send me 7,000 miles to start the race. They sent me 7,000 miles to finish it. And as we look at what we're dealing with in our lives today, we need to kind of regroup perhaps. We need to think about finishing the race. We need to think about moving on. As Paul said in Philippians chapter 3, we need to press on to the prize of the high calling in Christ Jesus. Don't give up. And as Paul was talking about, he was using a race mentality. He said, we press on to the mark. Don't quit. Always continue. Just like that. Just like Samuel should have been. We as Christians need to get back into the race of life. Although we may stumble and fall, we may make bad decisions like Samuel made. We need to get up and keep going. We may not be the first to cross the finish line, but we need to finish the race. We need to keep on as God works in our lives. Although we stumble and endure many hardships, we need to get back on our feet again. Continue running the race. Do not quit. And the good news is that the same God that was able to work with Samuel until the day he died is the same God that's willing to do the same for you. As you look back in your lives, no doubt, many if not all of you can see mistakes you've made in life's journey. In fact, if you can't, there may be something wrong. The question is not whether we make mistakes. The question is not whether we trip and fall in this race of life. The question is whether we get up and stay the course. Make the necessary corrections. And so as we consider the life of Samuel today, I urge you to do self-evaluation. Consider the necessary corrections that might need to be made in your life today, that you might victoriously cross the finish line. Because the one thing that I think is so fantastic about God is it's not like the Olympics. In God's race, if you cross the finish line, you are a winner, regardless of when you get there. He's going to allow everyone who finishes the race to get the prize. What a God. It's not just for the strong. It's not just for those that have the greatest willpower. It's for everyone that will stay the course, for everyone that will do what it takes to cross the finish line, through His grace, through His blood, by His Spirit, until He comes or we die, whichever comes first.